Hello again, and first of all, welcome back, and thank you for subscribing to the channel. I'm really glad that you find these historical looks interesting. Also, being able to use today's tools, and as I do a bit more of an in-depth, some people do very quick versions. I like to actually show you how the pins are going in, what I'm doing. So again, thank you for your comments. I'll always try and answer when I can. There's been a bit of a gap between looks, but let's get on with today. I've had several requests and questions on transformations and how they're made, what you can do to do them yourself, and also about the wigs and pieces that I've used or that you can use for these looks. Specifically with the Edwardian period, 1900, 1901 to around 1912, during the reign of King Edward. Hair went from the Victorian look, which was very sleek, very smooth, middle parts, buns, braids, plaits, which was much more austere, into these completely flamboyant, very wide on the sides, puffy, big. In fact, hats had to get wide in the actual circumference, of the wider than the head, just to put on. So hat pins and everything else came into place. Wonderful period for excess, and it did only last around 10 years. Like many looks that are iconic, you think of them as coming in at the beginning of that decade and then lasting right the way through. They trickle in and they evolve like everything else. So let's talk about different things. Transformations. Transformations was a name that was used back in the day for basically a female or woman's wig. So it could be a 3/4 wig, it could be a full wig, but it was used generally to incorporate into their hair. So the finer their hair, the more you wanted a bigger look, the more you would rely on transformations or switches or pieces to put in. So transformations, as I say, basically a wig or a larger piece. So if we look at something like this I set in curls ready to put up, and you can see this one is elasticated for today's looks, but back in the day you're going to probably have string that was put through, so you could pull this onto hair that was pulled back and then dress it from there. If it was something that was being done that was of a more styled on top look, where everything was being put into place, you may want something like this. This is very straight at the moment, but you can curl this, whatever. This is firmer in the way that it's put together, and it has combs, which you would have had at the time, and that way you can put the combs into place and then you can cross pin around it and then start dressing the hair. I would always say you would, if you were doing a curly style, you would curl it first and then place it onto the head. So that's transformations. Switches, which was another word for a hair piece as opposed to a full wig, would be pieces like this braided piece. Again, it's worked on a mesh so that the hair is woven in. It's pre-braided, and so you could just loop this into your style to fill it out, or it could even be used around the edges to fill out the natural hair. But these ones can come pre-done, or would have at the time come pre-done. And right now, the market for hair pieces and wigs is very, very big again. In certain countries, it's a natural thing just to have a wig on. And so whether you're working in theatre, movies, a little production, or doing a photo shoot, or you're doing someone for a fancy dress, whatever, getting pieces in, they can either be synthetic or they can be natural. You can find them all over the internet now, and so it's a really easy way to pick up the pieces. As I say, some pieces like this come pre-done, but I always find that I like to set the pieces myself. So this particular piece, which is just on a board at the moment, on a headboard, I've got a slight amount of curl in this. I'm matching this to this piece, and again with a couple of requests on how did I actually place it, because if you go back to the Edwardian video that I did, I actually placed that, but I'd already done some of the curls. So with this piece, in my next video, I'll actually do the curls so you can see them being done, and then we'll add the transformation into the hair so you can see the whole thing taking place. Also, just while we're on it, you can also buy these smaller pieces, as I said, that are already done. This one's braided, and then it has crossed sections of style into it. Again, a comb. These can be used where you're actually using the design they put in, or you can cover that design up with more of the natural hair. And they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And I don't use these as much because I do find 17th century or 18th century, 19th century and then into the 20th century with the Edwardian looks, you're wanting to use a piece, but you're wanting the style to suit that person or that look. And so you can imagine going to a ball or some sort of event. Yes, a lot of people had Gibsons, a lot of people had these very full styles, but you didn't want to look like cookie cutter. So every hairstylist, every designer of hair at the time that was worth their salt would make sure that each person looked different. Many people of upper crust had maids, so they would learn how to do different styles on their hair. So for me, it's much more important to actually put an individual look on an individual person. And so that's what we did with the last one. And that's what I'll do with this one. Now the other thing is clusters. Clusters would be more these sort of things, but maybe with a lot of curls that are already set in. So you would have bought them pre-done, and rather than finishing it like I'm going to with the next video, you'd actually plonk it in the middle of the head or on the side, wherever it went, and that would be a complete look. Some of the wigs back then as well, because frizzy little fringes were very popular for that 10-year period, especially at the beginning, more than curls. And so if you didn't have a fringe, you could get wigs or transformations that would have a hairpiece for a quarter of the head or a half of the head, but the front would be a fringe. So the fringe would be brought forward, the rest of the hair would be set back, and then through the lace you would pull the natural hair which matched just in places through, and then comb that back into the style with the fringe falling forward. And so again, for the time, it was very elaborate and it made it look very much more natural. A couple more things to talk about. So clusters, toupees was another word used, which it's used more for men now, but you did get female toupees. Again, pieces for the top of their head that were sit on, and you would style them accordingly. And then also, I was asked about doing the transformations or the little hair pieces for the sides, etc. You would start with what we call drawings. So drawings are when a woman's brushing her hair through, you get your brush, you pull all that hair out, and instead of throwing it away like we do now, they would roll it up and they would keep it. And at one time there was actually little, beautiful little china ornate jars that you would keep on your dressing table, and these would be placed in there, and as they built up, it obviously matched your hair, and then you would use that to fill out, whether you were filling out the roll side of the hair or whether you were using it to fill out the back into a bun. And so you would fit them together. You would then take hair nets of whatever colour, very fine hair nets that matched the colour of your hair, and then you would place the hair that you had built up into a net. You can then close the net together and then bring it into whatever shape it is that you're wanting, sew this together, and then you could bring that and place that as opposed to using these ready-made pieces. So a lot of people did that, and some people still do now. You'll find people that like to still dress period, like 1940s, they will keep their hair, they will roll them into nets, and then they can use them as rolls on the side. And so that's how they're made at home. And you can do that with hair that you're brushing out of wigs. I don't throw the hair away. When I brush out wigs, when I brush out mannequin heads, I've got hair left, I roll it up, I bag it, and then I can always use it for making up pieces or for filling out pieces. So there's always a use for things. We tend to throw everything away these days, but people are much more frugal, or maybe sensible if you look at it back in the day. So that's clusters, that's wigs, that's switches. As we said before, during the Edwardian period, you've got to remember, movies were just coming in, photographs were, from 1860 and then into the 1900s. People were beginning to get them done more. Really, if you move into this First World War, you're finding more general people doing them because of sweethearts being away, etc. But it was more of an elite thing beforehand. And so when it came to fashion, America, England, Britain was still looking towards Paris. So when you look at fashions and how the hair was styled, how the clothes were styled, Paris was still number one for everyone to look at. So we'll go into that a little bit more as we move through, but I just wanted to give you a little feel of how these pieces work and what they're about. Any more questions on that I haven't covered, we'll just make this a little 10-minute video, but let me know, and I'll answer those questions, and I'll try and get onto this mannequin as soon as possible, and we'll place the transformation into the hair in a little bit more detail than we did in the last look. But there are 2 Edwardian looks already online, so if you have missed them, just check through the listings on my site and then you'll see where they are. But thank you for listening. I hope that answers your questions, and I'll be back with you soon.